Today I'm going to show you how I use a creative tool called Fractal Filters to create unexpected and abstract results in my beauty images, achieving it all in camera. I'm Lindsay Adler and I'm a portrait and fashion photographer based in New York, and I've been shooting creative imagery for decades now. And for a very long time, I would regularly put stuff in front of my camera. Really anything that I thought might work. So crystals and prisms and ornaments, and sometimes it was to break up the image, sometimes it was to add lens flare. And so I've always really enjoyed this technique. And recently I was looking online and I came across something called Fractal Filters. It's this company that tried to make a product out of this creative technique. So it's prisms and it's these different shapes and it breaks up the image. And basically it's to encourage you to be creative and to experiment. And so I was able to create this beauty image after playing on a test shoot day. A test shoot day for me is a day that's just all about experimenting. It's all about creativity and trying something new. So I saw these filters, I bought them around $100, and I started to experiment. So I want to show you how I made this image and what was involved. The lighting was actually very simple, and I really just wanted to focus on how I was using those filters. So let's take a look at what the filters look like first. So the kit that I got came with these three. Each one does something a little different. I can't exactly tell you how to use them because they all do a different result, and it depends on your concept. So let me show you what I did for this photograph. So in the behind the scenes, you'll see that I'm only using one light. I'm using a bare bulb, no modifiers, nothing on it at all. And this is going to give me a hard light source. I wanted to keep the lighting really simple because I'd have so much going on with the fractal filter itself. And then you can see that I'm holding the filter in front of my camera. Now, one of the things I did like about these fractal filters that you can see in that other photograph is that something I've always struggled with holding the prisms and the crystals is it's hard to hold your camera, focus, compose, zoom, and hold a crystal. So what they've actually done is they've actually designed it for a place for you to fit your fingers in. So it makes it easier to manipulate it and also hold on to your camera. So I really liked that with the design. So you can see me holding it in this behind the scenes photograph. Let's also talk about the camera that I'm using. So I'm using a Canon 5D Mark IV, but the important thing that I was using in this instance was a 24 to 105 millimeter lens. The reason that I recommend a zoom lens for this, and again, you don't have to, is because you get totally different results when you vary kind of three things. So you get different results depending on the filter you're using. You get different results based on the distance of that filter to the camera. So in some instances, I'm holding it right up to the camera. In other instances, I'm holding it further away. And then the third way that you get different results is your focal length. So a wider focal length versus zooming in more is going to give completely different results. So that's why I think a zoom lens was good for my creative experimentation with this. Now, one of the things that I learned is that the closer I'd hold the filter up to the camera's lens and the wider aperture I'd choose, the result would be more just a broken up image. So you would just see it broken up. And I actually have an example of a photo that I did with that look. So this is when that filter was right up against my camera and it just creates these abstract repetitions. But when I held the filter closer to the subject, further away from my camera, it actually becomes more in focus. You actually see the filter itself, and that's a completely different result. And I hadn't really seen anything like that before, so I was happy with what I came up with here. So I want to show you what I captured in camera and then what it was achieved in post-processing. So let's go back to the raw image. This is exactly what the photograph looked like in camera, no processing, nothing. But I'm always shooting tethered. And when I was shooting tethered, I was adjusting the color and the contrast. So in Capture One, you could also use Lightroom. This is what I came up with. And what I did here is I popped the highlights, so you see the skin go brighter. I cooled down the white balance. I made everything a little bit more blue. And I also desaturated the skin. I wanted the skin to almost look white, like it was painted on, so that the color of the eye makeup would pop even more. So I desaturated the reds and yellows. So I pulled out that color, and now the eye makeup really, really pops. So that's what I captured straight out of camera. Then I tweaked it here in Capture One. And now let's talk about the retouch. I used a bare bulb, really hard light on the skin, and so you see a lot of texture. Not her fault, it's the part of using the hard light, so I do need to fix that. But also looking at the center of interest, the eye. I think that the shape of the eyelid looks a tiny bit droopy, so I want to kind of round that out a little bit and maybe raise up the eyebrow. It just gives more shape to the eye. let's see. So here's what I did for the retouch. Okay, notice I gets a little rounder. I saturated the iris itself. I also went in, I saturated the eye makeup just a little. In Capture One, I had desaturated and I needed to bring that back. So this looks good so far, but I did notice a couple other things I wanted to change. Once I rounded out the eye, I noticed, oh yeah, there's a bunch of the eyes in that reflection, in that fractal filter. I need to round those out as well. So I did. And then I also wanted to do a little color grading. Color grading is where I adjust contrast and color to achieve a certain mood. So what I decided to do, as you can see it here, is I actually made the skin even whiter, even more pale. So we're making it very illustrative. And I added some blues to the shadows. So this is what I ended up with as the result. So here's where we began. And this is what we ended up with. And I think it's got a kind of cool vintage feel, but also surreal and dreamlike. I really like the results. So tell me, have you done this before? Have you held a prism in front of your camera or a crystal, or have you actually tried fractal filters? Leave a comment. Let me know what your experience has been. And of course, if you've liked these photo deconstruction videos, be sure to like and subscribe.